Grading NFL off seasons. Today we are grading the AFC West. If you haven't seen it already, I have done the AFC North and the AFC South. So make sure to check those out if you haven't already. Subscribe to see the rest of them. We are going by division so that way we can talk about each team in depth. Today, again, we are doing the AFC West, and we're going to start with the Denver Broncos. Broncos don't have a lot to talk about. They have two additions, as you can see, and then they didn't have their first draft pick until round 3. They also didn't lose a ton. A lot of what they lost was cuts, so they could save cap space. They didn't have a lot of cap space to work with. Coaching-wise, they do let go of Joe Lombardi and bring in, or they promote, I should say, Davis Webb to be their new offensive coordinator, former quarterback, and for this team, for the Giants, for Texas Tech, for Cal University. He's been around. Anyway, I don't know if that was the right choice, to be 100% honest. Obviously, the offense, when healthy, is a solid offense that I think could be very good this year. But you just made the AFC Championship game, and if Bo Nix is healthy, you're probably making it to the Super Bowl, and then you go and fire your offensive coordinator. That being said, I don't have that strong of feelings about it. If you've seen previous videos, I do have a lot of strong feelings about coaching changes. This is not one of those. I don't care that much that they let go of Joe Lombardi. I am a Texas Tech fan, so I'm a little biased, honestly, towards Davis Webb. So instead of saying it's a good signing because I'm biased, or promotion, I'm just going to say to be determined. I'm not really going to put much stock into that move that happened right there. Clearly, there was something between Peyton and Lombardi, as there are stuff with Peyton and everything. He seems very hard to get along with. I really don't like Sean Payton at all, but I'm not going to let that affect this right here and affect this grading. Like I said, there's not much to get into here, so this is probably going to be one of my shorter teams that I do. They bring in two guys. They bring in a safety, and then they, of course, trade for Jalen Waddle. It's very similar and reminiscent of the Jags offseason, which we've already graded. Let me pull them up. Very similar, except they kept all their coaches. And by the way, if you want this, Google Sheets is what it is, of all the offseason moves that happened by each team. I even have a tab with the entire NFL. It actually started with this, and then I didn't like how hard it was to read. So then I went through and made it all pretty for each team. If you want that, I'll leave a link in the description. You could just look all this information up. It's kind of pointless. I say that in every video, but it's true. I just got bored one day, and it's not even that I got bored. I just really like having this type of information very easily accessible. So I decided to sit down and make it. And it took a few days, but here we are. Anyway, back to this. So I graded that Jags one an F, and I didn't want to. I really didn't want to overreact with grades, is what I meant to say. But there just wasn't much there. I've seen good videos, practice videos of Rook, the defensive lineman they traded for, so that's nice. But other than that, there just wasn't much there, and they got stagnant, I would say, and I would say they got worse even. Actually, not even. They got worse. They didn't even stay stagnant. Defensively, I'm a little worried for them. We'll have to see what Bishal Tootin turns into. If he doesn't at least somewhat match the Travis Etienne Jr. production, then their offense is going to take a hit as well. Of course, Devin Lloyd on the defensive side of the ball. There's a lot of issues I do have with that Jags one, and that's why I ended up giving it an F, because they had all that loss and no major move. Whereas there's not that much loss here, and you have a major move. So I already like this offseason way more than the Jacksonville Jaguars. I just felt the need to say that because you could look at that and be like, they're the same. Yeah, not quite. So Bo Nix has dealt with a bunch of wide receivers as his guy that stretches the ball or stretches the field. And there's a lot of inconsistency. You have a Troy Franklin in there. You had a ton of guys. I don't even need to sit here and name them all. You had a ton of guys in that spot, in that role. Now you're going to have a more consistent Jalen Waddle. I can't say totally consistent because he just doesn't stay healthy all the time. His injury type, though, isn't the type of guy that's going to miss a bunch of games. He's just going to play in those games hurt. I'll let you decide if that's better or worse than just completely missing them. I would think better, but if you're not ready to go, then you could be hurting your team. It just kind of is what it is. Waddle's going to give you about 14, 15 really like healthy, good games. And then after that, it's shaky whether he'll miss the rest or play through injury, whatever the case may be. So that's why I didn't say consistent deep threat, but he is a very great one, I should say. Like I think he is going to help this Broncos offense really stretch the ball down the field, assuming the health of Bo Nix. The only real thing about it is their start to their schedule is absolutely brutal. So I do wonder if this is something that we see click immediately or if this is something that takes a little bit before it gets going. Other than that, there's really only thing to talk about is the extensions and the re-signings, which is J.K. Dobbins, Alex Singleton at linebacker, and that's really all I want to get into. I don't really care about little Jordan Humphrey or fullback, Jaleel McLaughlin. They're running back 3, maybe even 4 now after the draft, where they got Jonah Coleman. I just don't care. So we'll talk about the top 2. Singleton is obviously really important to have back. He played really well down the stretch last year. And then J.K. Dobbins, when healthy, is their number 1 back and a very good one at that. That's really all there is to talk about. It's definitely better than the Jags, like I said. Trade away your first-round pick to get a Jalen Waddle, which I do think helps the offense out a ton. Do I think they are better this year than they were last year? I don't know. I think the defense takes a little bit of a hit. First of all, they were so great last year. As you can see, 2nd in yards allowed per game, 3rd in points allowed per game. Such a good defense. I think there will be a natural slight regression. Nothing crazy. It's just typically you're not going to be top 3 defense every year, right? So I think you might see a slight regression, especially with losing guys and not replacing them. But again, I don't hate the guys that they lost. I don't think it's that big of a deal. When I say slight regression, I'm talking about like the 2nd or 3rd best defense to like 5th or 6th. Like I'm not talking some major regression. I do think the schedule's harder though, so maybe it's closer to the 8th, 9th best defense. Still top 10 defense in my opinion. But I do think that got worse in this offseason. But of course the offense, I do, assuming Davis Webb, it doesn't matter, Sean Payton's offense anyway. So I do think the offense got better, assuming the health of Bo Nix will be there, but that's not part of what we're doing right here. That will be part of the prediction videos that we make June, August, whatever that might be. This is June. I meant July or August, whatever that might be. Anyway, so offensively, I think they get better. Defensively, I think they get slightly worse. This is really hard to do. I should really make these grades out and then make the video, but I just kind of want to go off of how I truly feel, and things change as you explain things in depth. Your feelings change about it. You say stuff out loud, and it kind of makes it more real and more, you think about it more is what I'm trying to say. So I try to save them for the video, but then I get into these weird funks right here where I'm like, I don't know what to say. I'm going to say a B-, I think. It's really hard to say that with only 2 signings, 2 additions. That's really hard to say. I just think offensively they do get better, and I think B-, C+. I really don't care. You can go either one. For the video purposes, I'm actually going to say C+, because I think Waddle comes in and knocks up this offense 1 notch. Defense steps down a notch. So the team probably stays roughly where they were, but they were really good last year. Yeah, I'm just going to go with C+. That is my official grade. On to the Kansas City Chiefs. They were busy this offseason. They were letting go of a ton of defensive players. They were bringing in big-time Super Bowl winners. And they were re-signing Hall of Famers. So let's talk about it. They also drafted twice in the first round. Let's start again with the coaches like we typically always do. Matt Nagy's out the door. Eric Bieniemy is back as the offensive coordinator. What a W. I'm not 100% sure I love Bieniemy. Actually, I know I don't love Bieniemy, but he's clearly got something with Kansas City. He works with Kansas City. It's obviously Andy Reid's team, Andy Reid's offense. But Bieniemy really works as a number 2 behind Andy Reid, and we get back to that. They also bring Kenneth Walker. So Patrick Mahomes, for the first time since Kareem Hunt, peak Kareem Hunt, has an actual running back. And he only had that for like half a season before Kareem Hunt did what he did. So he's going to have, and you can make the argument you'll only have Kenneth Walker for half a season because he might get injured. He played all 17 last year, but he was heavily switching in and out with Zach Charbonnet. I would think he's not going to switch out like that this year, but who knows? I think Walker, by the way, was a very good signing. Paying him about $15 million a year, I think, is a good deal. So I like the signing of Kenneth Walker, and I do think, especially early on while Mahomes is coming back from an injury and you might want to rely on him a little less, it's important to have a Kenneth Walker guy that you can just lean on and run the ball with. So I really like the signing. Other than that, you signed a lot of depth and solid pieces. Not even depth. I shouldn't say that. I hate using the word role player, so I started to say depth. But a lot of these guys are going to be starting, so they're not necessarily depth. They're just not stars. You sign a safety, a D tackle, 2 corners, all guys that are going to come in and probably play a decent amount. The corners are iffy, but they also don't have a ton of corners, so at least one of them probably will. Gilman from the Ravens was actually very important in my opinion. I think he allowed a Kyle Hamilton to play closer to the line, so I do think that is a solid signing. And so that is the additions. Let's talk about the losses here. It's a lot. Of course, Leo Chenal, the linebacker, very good linebacker, might I add, he's gone. Trent McDuffie, traded. Jalen Watson signs with that same team, the Rams. Joshua Williams, another corner, gone. Brian Cook, safety, gone, although I think they upgraded there. And so you lose a lot of starting people on your defense. You also lose Isaiah Pacheco, which I'm sure they don't care about, with Kenneth Walker. Hollywood Brown, which I think you would love to have. And then a Juwan Taylor, who is going to probably still cost them penalties somehow, some way. That's how many times he would commit penalties for the Chiefs. So I don't think they worry about that too much either. So yeah, I worry about this defense a lot. Now, if there's one thing that I've learned since watching this Chiefs dynasty start, and maybe it's over, maybe it's not. We'll have to see what happens. As I watch this Chiefs dynasty, one thing I've learned is don't doubt Steve Spagnuolo. So I won't. But there is a lot of missing pieces on this defense now. Bright side is you spend 2 first-round picks on 2 defensive players. Mansour Delaney is a great corner from LSU. I think he could step in day one and be the number 1 corner for a team. They get him. Something else I didn't put on here because it just happened a day or 2 ago. L'Jarius Sneed has re-signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. They also made a trade today. They traded away an offensive lineman, so that's also not on here. My bad. But so L'Jarius Sneed comes back to the Chiefs. Very Patriots-esque, letting a player leave. Or actually, they traded him for picks, and he signed some huge contract with Tennessee. Didn't do much, gets cut, comes back to Kansas City for cheap. Assuming they can get him back up to what he was, and that's kind of what Kansas City does, is they take corners and they make them very good. Assuming you can make him back to what he was, you have him, and then you have Delaney from LSU, like I said. That's a solid corner duo, and then you expect one of these but these other corners that you signed, at least one of them to step up. Maybe that works. I still worry about their front line. I still worry about their linebacking core. But again, I'm not going to distrust Steve Spagnuolo, but it's still going to affect their grade here. When doing this, I'm not going to say they're going to be some bad defense. Spagnuolo doesn't have bad defenses. As far as extensions, of course, they re-sign one of the linebackers I was talking about was iffy on. Drew Tranquill's back, who I do think is a very solid, good linebacker. I don't think as good as Chanel was. The money says that as well. But he's solid. He kept him on a cheaper deal. I don't hate it. Tyquan Thornton actually ended up being a really good deep threat last season. So bringing him back is solid, especially for only $5.5 million a year. It makes losing Hollywood Brown easier because Tyquan played well, and there were times you kind of wanted to see him more. And now you're going to get to because Hollywood's gone. And then, of course, they bring back Travis Kelce. Great, in my opinion. I think a lot of people are over Travis, whether it's because of Taylor Swift or whatever the case may be. Lame take, by the way. Maybe you just don't like the dude himself. That's fine. Whatever. He's still good. A lot of people see him that he's not his peak and not his prime, and you hate him. And I think, or not hate him, that's poor word choice. You just think he's bad, and that's just not true. I was going to say maybe he's washed, but I don't like that term either. I don't think he's washed. I think he's just not as good as he once was, but he's still better than the majority of tight ends in football. If you look at his numbers, he is still statistically a top 10 tight end in football. So I think the downfall of Travis Kelce has been greatly exaggerated, and he's still a very good tight end for your team, getting paid $12 million a year, which is super fair. Probably one last ride. I do really like that move. Obviously, it's Mahomes' guy and his go-to target. Love the move. So I really like the extensions that they had. I really like their draft class. They just lost so much on defense. Overall, I think I'm going to give them a B. Lost a lot, but how much does it actually affect them? It's honestly more so the D-line and linebackers that I'm concerned about. I've watched Kansas City since this dynasty has started just print out corners. I'm not that worried about corners. I am more worried about the run-stopping ability of this team and things of that nature. So that is what I'm worried about. And then offensively, I do think they probably upgrade in a lot of ways. So I think a big way of that is Eric Bieniemy coming back. I'm not a fan of Matt Nagy whatsoever. Who is? Truly. So Eric Bieniemy coming back, big plus for this offense. Kenneth Walker actually having a rushing attack, big plus for this offense. So I'm giving this a B because I do think they end up getting better. I do think they're back in the playoffs next year, and I am trusting the defense to work its way out, and I think the offense took a couple steps forward, to be honest with you, because between Walker and Bieniemy, I really think that's just one step forward. I think that's two. Having a better offensive mind plus superstar running back, that is why they get a B. All right, let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders, one of my favorite off seasons of the entire year, I think. Let's talk about it and see what happens. They lose nobody, right? Let's just start there. I don't care about Parham gone. I don't care at all about trading away Geno Smith, Lonnie Johnson. I just don't care that they let these guys go. Tyree Wilson gets traded. I believe it was to the Saints. I do like Tyree Wilson. I loved him coming out of college. I didn't love him. I loved his potential, but I was very clear, not that I was making videos back then, but I was clear to the friends that I talked to as a tech fan that he had potential. I wasn't sure he was ever going to get to that potential, but I very clearly saw what he could be. He never got to that potential. So maybe in a new environment he can, but he was never going to here. So I do like trading him, getting something back for him is really solid in my opinion. So let's talk about the additions that they have. Obviously, Tyler Linderbaum is the biggest one. W for the Raiders, especially having Ashton Jeanty, who struggled a little bit, especially at the beginning of the year, because of a poor offensive line. Bringing in a guy like Linderbaum is huge. You have Fernando Mendoza. I'll jump over to drafted real quick. You have a Fernando Mendoza that you're bringing in, and you sign Kirk Cousins. So no matter who the quarterback is, you really want a strong offensive line. Kirk obviously is the pocket passer that's not going to move, and Fernando Mendoza kind of stresses a little too quickly. I think he's a little too trigger happy when there's pressure in his face. So building up a good offensive line is extremely important. You sign Kwity Paye from the Colts. Linebackers, you get two good ones in my opinion, in Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean. So now this defense, you also in a way you add Max Crosby because we all thought he was going to be traded and now he's back. So you got a defense of Kwity Paye and Max Crosby, linebacking core of Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean. That's awesome. I really like that. I think this is a team that you could see take a huge step forward. Unfortunately, they're in one of the hardest divisions of football. You got the Broncos, the Chiefs, and the Chargers in your division. So, unfortunately, I don't think they have any chance of winning the division. In fact, they're probably still going to finish fourth. But this team, I think, is good enough on paper to win a solid 6 to 8 games, and I still think they end up getting that 6 to 8 games, going from the worst team in the league to about 6 to 8 game wins. I think that's huge. Really good for them. They also trade for Teron Johnson from the Bills, and yeah, I just really like what they ended up doing. I forgot. I always start with the coaches, and I just got so excited I skipped them on me. They get rid of Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly. I put kinda because he was fired halfway through the year. Patrick Graham's gone. I hated that coaching staff when they got announced last year. I made TikToks about that one. So I got receipts for that. I hated the coaching signing last year. I didn't think they were close to winning anything, so it made no sense to go out and get a Pete Carroll, who you knew you'd have no more than 2 to 3 years. So I just hated everything about that. It just didn't fit the timeline. Now, bring in a younger guy like Clint Kubiak coming off a Super Bowl win, that fits the timeline. Bring in a rookie quarterback, that fits the timeline. Kirk Cousins coming in to help progress and develop this rookie quarterback, that fits the timeline, but also allows them, I think, to win now. I think Kirk is going to be very good for Fernando just off play style and how I think he can help bring Fernando along. Obviously, Fernando's not ready. He's going to be the one starting and playing, and Kirk's the type of guy, he's not going to win you a ton of games, but he's not going to lose that many either. So I really like that signing. I said in the last video I thought that Houston should have signed him. He should be a Houston Texan, and that way that applies a little pressure to CJ Stroud, but also an insurance plan if he doesn't work out. As a Viking fan, I saw what happens when you don't have an insurance plan. That's why Minnesota went out and brought in Kyler Murray. You need an insurance plan when you're not sure about your quarterback, and the fact they're not paying CJ proves they're not sure. They should have been the ones to go out and get Kirk. Instead, Clint Kubiak gets to coach Kirk again, as he did in Minnesota when he was offensive coordinator there. So yeah, everything about this I really like. Like I said, they didn't lose much. They bring in a lot of guys that I really like. Jalen Nailor, as a Viking fan, I've watched a lot of Jalen Nailor, and I think he can be a really good number 2 on the team. I don't love the receiving core. If they could bring in a Stephon Diggs, I would feel much better about this receiving core. But until then, Trey Tucker, Jalen Nailor is your 1 and 2. You got Diggs, Tucker, and Nailor. That's awesome. I really love that. Of course, you have Brock Bowers as well, but I really think they need at least one more solid receiver in front of Nailor and Tucker, and then I really like this team. Again, in this division, they're not going to win anything, but if this team was in the NFC South, I'd probably not actually. I was going to say I'd probably pick them to win, but there is a team that we'll get to eventually, but there is a team in the NFC South that I really like this year. Anyway, so yeah, I think they improved across the board. I think they finally, and this might be the Tom Brady being the new owner or partial owner that got them into this situation, they finally feel like they have a clear direction and a clear timeline. They were just doing stuff previous years. It feels like everything's changed. Clear direction, clear timeline. They're not going to be great this year, but I do think they take a step up, and then they could take another step up next year because they're still going to have a solid amount of cap space. And then after that, that's when they should be competing. So I think this is a great first step. I don't know if you could have a better first step than this. Everything they did I liked. There's not a move that I thought they shouldn't have done. I don't know if I can give it an A+. I am going to, though. I'm going to give it an A+, strictly because when you are at the bottom, which is where they were the worst team in the league. I don't know if there's a better first step, and I think they took a first 2-3 steps into this rebuilding process, setting up the timeline, getting the right pieces in place. That way, in 2 to 3 years' time, they're ready to roll. I love everything about it. A+. All right, we got the final team in the AFC South, and we have the Los Angeles Chargers. I feel like, low-key, I've been saying NFC South, and if I have, I'm sorry. I don't think I have. Did I say South? I'm all over the place. AFC West. And if I have been saying NFC this whole time, I'm sorry. I'm in AFC. All right, let's talk about this. They lose Jesse Minter, defensive coordinator. That sucks. They bring in a new defensive coordinator from Western Michigan. I remember reading about it when I was doing this, and I remember seeing that there were ties between him and Harbaugh. I don't fully remember them. And then they also offensively bring in Mike McDaniel. I think a lot of people are going to underrate the loss of Jesse Minter. I think that's going to probably hurt this team more than people are expecting. Mike McDaniel, though, I think probably ends up helping them more than people are expecting. I don't really see anybody talking about Mike McDaniel coming in. I just realized I spelled Dolphins wrong. Mike McDaniel coming in and really making this offense click, and I think that's exactly what he's going to do. Again, I just think defensively they might take a step back. They're going to take a step back in my opinion. So, honestly, I think both ways are getting underrated in a good and a bad way here. They lose out on quite a few people. The important ones are Odafe Owe. You go into the Commanders, got a bag. Zion Johnson, guard, going to the Browns. St. Juice, solid player, but he's gone now to Shanahan. Going to the additions, they add center Tyler Biadasz. I don't know how to say his name, but I do know who he is. I know he's a very good center, or at least a solid center at this point in his career. In Dallas, he was very good. Commanders, he was iffy. Now he's going to be in LA, where I think he probably is somewhere in between his Cowboys and Commanders self, in my opinion. I think he's going to be solid here, which they needed help on. Their offensive line, was horrible in previous seasons. Justin Herbert has been running for his life. Big part of that, though, is the injuries to both starting tackles last season. Well, obviously now that they're going to be back, and now you add a center. I really love that. Other than that, they don't do it too ton much. Dalvin Tomlinson, he was with the Cardinals and the Browns and Vikings. Missing a team. Was he with the Ravens at some point too, I think? So he's here now. D tackles just get paid a lot of money, 7.5. All he's going to be is a run stopper. That's his whole goal. That's his whole point on this team. And he will do that solidly. And they also bring in Cole Strange as a guard. Keaton Mitchell is a guy a lot of people are excited about, especially in the fantasy football world. I'm not that excited. I understand the A-Chan and how great he looked with Mike McDaniel, and then you got a Keaton Mitchell, like very similar skill set, and doesn't really tickle me one way or another. You extend Khalil Mack, Trey Lance, Trey Pipkins, which I think is very good, and Trevor Penning. I think they're really good backups. You don't want them starting all year like last year, but I do think they're really good backups. You bring in but you extend and re-sign a bunch of depth in Phillips and Perryman. I really like what they did there. I also like bringing in edge rusher Akeem Mesidor. I saw a lot of people didn't love this, especially because of how old he is. My thought process is the Chargers are ready to compete right now. They're trying to win right now. So rather than taking some unproven upside pick, they took the older guy who you know what he is, and he probably doesn't have the ceiling as everybody else has, but you know what he is, and he could probably come in day one and start. And I really like that on the opposite side of Khalil Mack. I think in this system, assuming Chris O'Leary is going to be a good defensive coordinator, I do think that he could have a small chance to win a DPOY. Defensive Rookie of the Year. DPOY is crazy. I truly do think that, though. I think there's a world where on the other side of a Khalil Mack, you are able to get a bunch of one-on-one matchups and then sack the quarterback a ton. That is a realistic world, in my opinion, especially, again, like I said, for an older guy coming out of the draft. So it's a move I really liked, again, especially for this team specifically. I also really look at all the linemen they drafted. That's 1 in the second round, 2 fourth round, and then 2 at the end there. So they drafted 4 offensive linemen, and then they bring in 3 offensive linemen. I really like that. That was their biggest weakness last year. They are trying really hard to attack that weakness, and I love that. Not only for Herbert, but for Amari and Hampton as well. So this one's very difficult because I'm so split down the middle. And I'm split down the middle because I think McDaniel is going to really elevate this offense, but Chris O'Leary, I don't think he's going to make this defense suck, but I just think so highly of Jesse Minter. It's more of I just think highly of the guy leaving than I think low of the guy coming in. And that's not their fault either. Like, I don't know if that should even be counted against them in their offseason rankings or ratings or grades or whatever, because Jesse Minter got signed somewhere else as a head coach. So as we sit here today, I do think they did more good than bad. They probably take a slight hit on defense between the coach. And again, they do get worse at edge rusher probably. Like, they are losing an edge rusher and they're bringing in a rookie to replace him. They probably at least start the season a little slower, especially with the new coordinator. And I think offensively they get a big step forward, though. I think with Mike McDaniel, upgraded O-line, I think they could take a big step forward. You would love another receiver, but we all know Keenan Allen's on the way. And that's not the guy I'm talking about. I want more of a deep threat. But Quentin Johnston's really been putting up work recently, and I really like what he's done. So maybe under Mike McDaniel, Quentin Johnston takes another step forward. That is certainly within the realm of possibility, and that is where we're at right now. I'm going to go ahead and give them a B. I was going to give them a B+, but I do think this defense does take a hit. They were top 5 in yards allowed per game and top 10 in points allowed per game. I think that takes more like we'll say points allowed per game, I think goes closer to like 12. And again, if the offense takes a step forward, I think it might, then that will not matter as much. But a lot of that is like injury, people coming back from injury, like an Amari and Hampton and these tackles coming back from injury. That's not anything they did this offseason. So I can't really give them all the credit for the offensive step or offensive leap that I think they're about to take. But I do think they did a lot of really good things here. So again, I'm going to give them a B. You could convince me a B+ pretty easily. But that is where we are at. They get a B. So those are the offseason grades of the AFC West. Let me know what y'all think. What grades would y'all give each of these teams? Next week, we are going to do the AFC East and the NFC East. So we're going to be talking about some A.J. Brown trade and everything else between those 8 teams. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that. Hit the like, do all of those YouTube things.